So good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for tuning into today's webinar. My name is Sadiq and I'm from the product support team, and I'm going to be the presenter for today's session. All right. In today's session, we're going to talk about how you can incorporate single touch workflow automation with the cloud version of ServiceDesk Plus. And before we move into the presentation, as usual, we have a couple of housekeeping items. All the attendees will be on mute by default, and if you have any questions during the session, you can always use the Q&A panel on the left-hand side of the screen, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's presentation where we'll answer all your queries. So with that, we'll start with the presentation. So what are single touch workflows? Single touch workflows are basically condition-based events or event-driven workflow automations, which is used to complete a set of tasks either sequentially or parallelly or in a batch. So the entire idea behind a single touch workflow is to have minimal human intervention or have no intervention at all from the start until finish. Here's a quick sneak peek on the Zoho Circuit, which we're going to look at today. So using this is how we're going to build the single touch automation workflow. And using that, we're going to try to execute a couple of tasks within a single touch. So we'll get into that later. I'll get you to the application and I'll show you around on how you can build such circuits. So before that, let us discuss a couple of points. What are all the downsides of a manual workflow which has a lot of touch points? So first off, the IT technicians will have to perform a lot of repetitive mundane tasks time and again to achieve the task within the request or the process which is performed. And let's assume a scenario where you have a resource crunch or you have a lot of tickets, a lot of traffic on a particular day. Even in those situations, these tasks which could have been automated in the first place will have to be done manually, and thus decreasing the productivity. And also, nowadays most organizations rely on a hybrid infrastructure, which which involves a lot of tools involved to complete a set of tasks, and it usually ends up working in silos, and when it all comes together, it leads to a poor service experience. So how does single touch workflow automation help in these scenarios? Where is it going to help you out? A couple of examples that you see on the screen. The entire idea behind a single touch workflow is to make sure that we eliminate fatigue and we boost productivity across all the ITSM practices. And a couple of examples would be automating the employee onboarding request, or auto remediating IT incidents. For example, let's assume you have a server, a lot of servers within your organization, and you already have an automation in place. Whenever a server hits a capacity of 95% and above with its CPU level, you automatically trigger an incident into your instance. So the basic task behind this type of incident is for your technicians to log into the particular server and take care of the situation, or in most cases they would do a restart of the service or the machine itself to make sure the CPUs are running at an optimum level. But these type of tasks can be automated in the first place using a workflow where whenever these type of tickets are created, automatically go ahead and execute a set of tasks, and out of which is to log into the machine itself and perform a restart to make sure the CPU is running at an optimum level. And likewise, another example would be let's say you have a standard change that occurs in your organization time and again, or first of every month, where you apply a patch to your server or upgrade your server itself, and for that you take an entire backup of data, and that's a task which has to be done manually, where your technician needs to log in, perform the backup, and then come back and proceed with the other implementation. And in this case, even these type of tasks can be automated, and we'll see that in action in a while. So how do we achieve this? So we talked about how the automation could help you out, and the scenarios where you can use these automation. But how are we going to achieve that? So we're going to use our platform Zoho Circuit, which is a low code or a no code workflow automation platform which directly integrates with ServiceDesk Plus Cloud. So with Zoho Circuit, you can build a lot of circuits. So those are basically visual workflows to which you can build and execute tasks, and it also can make decision based on conditions. So if a condition matches, you can set out or execute a couple of tasks, and likewise you can have an entire workflow from start until finish. So while we're on the topic, let me take you to the application and give you a quick look on how you can enable Zoho Circuit. So if you log in as an admin technician to ServiceDesk Plus Cloud, and if you go into setup, and if you go into apps and add-ons, you should see integration. And inside integration, scroll down and you should see the Zoho Circuit integration card. Go ahead and enable it. And once you enable this, if you now go back to setup and scroll to the bottom, you should see Zoho Circuit now appearing on the setup panel. So this is how Zoho Circuit looks like, and you can see there are a couple of circuits which we have already built, and I'll take you to this in a while. So when we are actually seeing the use cases, I'll show you how you can build it, and I'll also show you a couple of examples where we already have built a circuit. So once you build the circuit to achieve your use cases, your IT teams can use their time to other tasks where a lot of a range of tasks which you have been doing manually for your tickets, your changes, and so on, can now be automated, where can perform actions such as running a PowerShell script. You can establish SSH connection, you can execute DB queries, and a lot more tasks. We'll look into that. Sure. So in today's webinar, we're going to take two use cases. We're going to see how you can onboard a new employee and the task behind onboarding, and how this can be automated with a single touch, and how it's all going to fold out. Later, we'll also see how a standard change can be dealt with ServiceDesk Plus Cloud and the automation behind that. So in an employee onboarding, so there are usually a couple of steps. First being, you create a service request for the employee onboarding. You gather all the details like the first name, the last name, and so on. You would have your own mandatory fields. So once you do that, then it kicks a couple of approvals. So it goes to the reporting manager and a lot more people, depending on how your organization has the hierarchy. And once the service request is approved, then you would have your technicians execute a couple of tasks to make sure that the new employee is provisioned in your organization. So in this use case, we are going to do a couple of tasks. One being provisioning a Microsoft 365 email account. And I also want to create this user in the on-premise AD and make sure that they are provisioned to the Microsoft Teams channel. And finally, we also have a legacy database, which is also needed to be updated with the new users' details. So I'm going to automate that as well using Zoho Circuit, and we'll see that in action in a while. So I'll take you back to the application. So under Zoho Circuit, now we are seeing the circuits page. And before I show you on how you can build a particular circuit, I'll just show you one, for example, which I've already built for employee onboarding. I'll give you a quick explanation on how this works, and we'll see it in action. And then we'll come back and see how to build a workflow. So in this use case, first, once the service ticket is approved, I want to create a Microsoft 365 account. So that's my first task. And for that, I've invoked a function. I've written a deluge script in order to perform that. And from that point, I want two tasks to be done parallelly. So from this point, I'm going to name this as employee onboarding task, and I've given two parallel workflows. One will check the region of the user itself. So it will see where exactly the user is by as per the service request, and based on the region, it's going to assign an organization unit based on the region, and within that, it's going to assign the user to the Active Directory and post it to the correct group. So that's one parallel job, and parallelly, you can see there is another job that's going on, that's to check the work model, if the user is a hybrid work employee or an office going employee and so on. It's going to check that, and based on those details, it's going to put an entry to the legacy database through a query. So once all this is done, meanwhile, parallelly, the third task, which you see in the middle, so it's also going to add this user to the Microsoft Teams channel. And once everything is done, it's going to add a summary to the ticket itself as a note on what automations was done and was it successful and what is the status. And once that's done, it's going to automatically close the ticket. So we'll see that in action. I'm going to go back to request. I'm going to choose new employee onboarding template. Sure. The work model, I'm going to choose hybrid. The employee type is permanent. I'm going to say the user's name is Jack, and the date of joining is today. The region is EU. And that's it. Those are the mandatory fields in the form that I have. And once that's done, I'm going to add a ticket. So the ticket is now added with all the relevant information, and you can see an approval is already triggered. So before I go ahead and approve this particular ticket, I'm going to go here. I'm going to open execution log. And yeah, so this is basically a log which shows you how many executions are running and what's the status of it. So if you can see now, once I click on approve, I'm going to say approved, click on submit. It's recorded. And now if I go here, refresh the page, perfect. You should see one that says initiated. Quickly preview it. So the automation was already started, and you can see a lot of green colored items, which basically means a couple of tasks has already been completed by the time we opened the preview window. And on the top, you see the legend for this. So green meaning success, the amber color meaning that it's still running, and red being failure, and other colors meaning that's straightforward. So the Microsoft account creation is already done, and out of 3 parallel executions, I had 3 tasks that needs to be done parallelly, out of which 2 tasks is completed. It has already checked for the work model. It has already put an entry in the legacy database. It has already added the user to the group, and here is where the status is still running, and the user is now being added to the on-premise Active Directory, and one of those tasks is done. So we'll give it like 1 more minute, and the status should be done. Yeah. And all these can be seen in live. So every time you see a green colored mark, if you go to the respective area, you should see all the tasks being completed. I am waiting here because I just want to show everything in one go. I'll go to the Teams channel. I'll show you what's happening there. I'll show you the database entry. And finally, I'll also show you the Active Directory user provision. But in your use case, whenever you see a green color on the circuit, which means that task is done, and you can go ahead and verify that then and there. So we'll just give it like 1 more minute. So meanwhile, I'll show you the DB entry, or we'll wait for 1 more minute. No problem. So if you can see on the screen, we have the graph mode, which shows the exactly what's the workflow that's running. And we also have the code mode, where you can see what is the execution that's happening. We also have an event log, where each event is recorded, and you'll know what's the exact status, what is the response, and everything. Yeah, so you can see that it's a success story. Everything is now turned into a green color, And you can also see the input and the output on the right hand side, the duration that it took to complete all the tasks within the circuit. So it almost performed like 4 tasks within the given time. And now it's time to verify if these are reflecting. So for now, go back to my, just a moment. I'll first log into the Active Directory server. Just a moment. Yeah. So it's on the India, but we provisioned it on EU. I'm going to refresh the. So you can see I've added Jack A with H as the last name, and the email and everything is now auto populated. So that's a success. And now we're going to see the database entry, and you can see that. Just a moment. I'm going to choose the facility database. And so currently, before I'm going to press enter, the previous search which I've did is showing you 14 results with 14 users. But now if I perform it, I'll see 15 results with the latest entry on the new user. So these are the 2 tasks. And finally, we also did one more task where we wanted to add the user to a particular Teams channel. And we'll see that. So once again, I'm on EU sales. So let me refresh the page here. And if I go into members and guests, adding to Teams channel usually takes a minute. So I think it's still in the process. It has already created the Microsoft account, and we are just waiting for the user to be added. So while this is getting added, I'll show you where we stand with the ticket itself. I'm going to refresh the ticket here. So if you now go into conversations, you can see a note has been added, and which gives you a summary on what actions we performed using Zoho Circuit and the automation. It's showing you the onboarding summary. It's showing you what AD task we did and the Microsoft 365 tasks that we performed. And finally, putting an entry on the legacy database, the facilities task as well. And if you can also notice, the ticket itself is closed, meaning that the ticket has been completed, the note is added, and the ticket has already been moved to the closed status. And I'll just go back and refresh the Teams page. Give me a second. Perfect. So you can see that Jack AH has now been added. And yep, so this is how you invoke or involve a Zoho Circuit to perform your onboarding task in the backend. So this is one use case that we took, but you can have, you can create circuits based on your tailor-made use cases. Since we just saw how you can create or how you can involve a circuit, we'll see how we can build one. So how a circuit builder looks like and what are all the options you would get when you try to build your own circuit. So I'm going to just click on add circuit and give it a name. All right. So this is just a drag and drop canvas, as you see on your change management workflow. You have options on the left to drag and drop, and you can invoke a lot of functions. So we'll go by that one by one. The first option you see is pass, which is a straightforward option where you pass from one state to another. If you want to just pass from one to another, it just automatically does that for you. Then there is a branch state where you can branch from one state to another. And let's say you're branching from new state 2. You can add a lot of conditions. And it's basically like an if condition where if this satisfies, go to state 5. If another satisfies, go to state 4 and state 3. That's one more flow control that you have. Or if you don't want to do, if you want to do it as we did for the employee onboarding, you can go for the parallel execution. So inside parallel, you can add a lot of paths. And once you add path, you can see it's highlighted in an yellow color. So that's one single path. So when the workflow reaches new state 2, it automatically opens up to two parallel paths, and it parallelly executes all the functions. The other one being wait. So wait is a straightforward option where if you want to wait for a couple of seconds during a particular state, then you can go ahead, create one, and just directly specify the number of seconds that you want or the number of minutes that you want to wait before moving on to the next state. So batch is basically if you don't want to create separate paths for every single action items, you can create a batch of items and put that into one single line, and that's going to be executed normally. Success and failure is to help you to determine if we are going on the right path. For example, it's not necessary that you need to draw a node from start until end for every single state. If you feel at some point between while you go through the workflow, if this happens, if this condition satisfies, consider the circuit as a success story, and you can just directly drop a success node there and connect the state to it. What happens is the circuit ends then and there. It considers it as a success and it just stops. Likewise, you can add failure, and if you feel if this happens or if this condition matches, consider that it's a failure operation and stop the action flow then and there. So you can do that. And so this is how you draw the flow control. And once you start, you create the flow control. This is how you see, this is how you incorporate the functions. I'll just open one more, the employee onboarding here for reference. Yeah. So on the left-hand side, you have function. So here we have incorporated on the Microsoft 365 task, we incorporated function here. So where do you invoke this? You can write it using 4 languages, one Deluge scripting or Node.js or Python or Java. But where do you incorporate this? This can be done. Let me once again open another tab. I'll show you where you can create such functions. Yeah. So under Zoho Circuit, in circuits, you have execution logs. So just go to circuit configurations. So these are all the functions which I have created for my circuits, and one of which is Microsoft 365 account. And this is written in Zoho Deluge. So likewise, you can write your own functions with the languages that you prefer. And once you do that, you can incorporate them inside the workflow to execute them. So another option you get is webhook. Webhook is to call your cloud API, do some API calls and so on. You can once again go back to circuit configurations and webhooks and create webhooks as per requirement. Finally, you can also incorporate another circuit. For example, while you go through a particular flow, and from that point, if you want to call or incorporate another circuit altogether, you can do that. It's just a drag and drop, and that's going to show you what circuit you want to choose and incorporate. So these functions which we just saw are all related to the cloud environment. So what about talking to your on-premise servers? So for that, we have a couple of engines. We have task engine, we have DB task, we have SSH task, and using SSH task, you can contact your Linux and your Unix machines, and you can also incorporate the PowerShell task engine to contact your Windows server. And to make it easy, we have given a couple of out-of-the-box actions available. You can see on the left-hand side, you can perform some AD task using the actions like adding an AD user, an AD group, you can unlock an AD account, and you can reset password and so on. Likewise, we also have a couple of options for the PowerShell task engine as well, where you can install a Windows application, uninstall, start or stop a service, or you can also restart a Windows server. So these are something that comes out of the box. You can just drag and drop, use it anywhere you want. You can modify it. Or you can just incorporate the task engine and SSH task to write your own, to build your own flow. So how do you contact the on-premise application? So for the cloud, you invoke APIs and so on. But how do you do that for the on-premise? So once again, I'm going back to circuit configurations, and we saw how functions work. We saw how webhooks work. We have something here called bridge. Bridge is basically a small deployment tool such as Probe, where you install it on your on-premise server, and through that we connect from the cloud. The ServiceDesk Cloud directly connects to an on-premise server. And you also have a tab that says credentials. That's to contact and pass through the authentication. If you feel that you don't want to save your credentials on the cloud platform for security purposes, you can always save it on the location where you have installed the bridge. So you can just create new credential, click on use credentials from bridge, and just directly put in the name of the bridge itself, and you can directly store it here and store it in the on-premise server instead of our application. So we also see script. Just a moment, it's loading. Yeah. So this is where you can create and add your partial scripts and other scripts which you can predefine a circuit configuration. And while you're building your circuit flow, you can just incorporate how you incorporate functions. Finally, we have files and tables. These are just a data repository where you can store your files locally here, or you can add your records as tables inside the application. You can invoke them into the Zoho circuit when and anytime it's required. Finally, we have schedules. Schedule, it's to run the functions and the circuit periodically based on a particular time period, and it's not going to run itself, and the tasks are going to get done. So this is how you build your own circuit for your use cases. So one we saw is for the employee onboarding, where we invoked almost all the functions that we have. We have invoked parallel executions. We have invoked branch execution. We've invoked functions, a couple of partial scripts, and so on. So we'll also see how you can handle change and handle a task within the change automatically with just a single touch. So to do that, let me just close this out, and I'll close these as well. Okay. So first, I'll just show you the change circuit. So you have a drop down here on the screen, which you can see. So that's to navigate or toggle between the request and the change circuits. So we have a particular circuit for a backup procedure. So we're going to create a standard change which is going to take a backup of a particular folder inside a server, and it's going to take the source path, and it's going to make a copy and put it on the destination path. And for that, we have created a particular circuit, and I'll just show it to you right here. A quick minute, guys. So here I've incorporated a partial script, and you can see that this is the bridge and the bridge credential ID, and I have two variables that's going to be checked, and these are source path and the destination path, which is once again an additional field inside the change template. So based on these fields, if these conditions are matched, and based on the change workflow, we're going to incorporate the circuit. So we'll see that in action. And to do that, I'm going to go to changes. Okay, so I'm going to create a new change, and I'm going to choose ERP backup. So almost everything is pre-filled, and I'm going to just go ahead and create the change. Perfect. So the change created, it's on the submission stage. All the details are here. And now we'll have a quick look on the workflow. So this particular change has a workflow where once you submit the change, it's going to automatically send a notification email. And once that is sent, it's going to say that the change is accepted, and it's going to go to the next level. So before going to planning, we have a wait for condition, which is basically going to check for the backup source path and the backup destination path. If those two fields are not empty, in that case, it's going to proceed and say that the planning is approved. And here we have a quick check to see if the change risk is high or no. If it's not a high risk change, then it's automatically say that the CAB is approved, and it's going to take you to the implementation stage. If not, if it's a high risk change, Obviously, we're going to send it out for an approval. And once the team members approve, it's going to say that the cab is approved, and when it's going to go to the implementation stage. So this is where we incorporate our circuit. So here is where the backup is going to happen on its own when the workflow reaches here. And once it completes the backup, it's going to say that the change is completed. It's completed successfully. It's going to update the closure code as it's going to say the closure code as closed completed. The description is the ERP data backup was successful. So we'll see that in action. So the only check that we're waiting for here is the backup parameters. I'm going to enter the backup source path and the destination path. So if you can see on the change details page, both are still not assigned. I'll quickly go back to my server. So I'll just close this. I'm going to go back to the ERP backup server. Perfect. Okay, so this is the source where I'm going to copy the backup, and it's going to paste it here on the backup folder. So you can see that's already a backup available here. I'm going to delete that real quickly. Perfect. So the backup folder is now empty. I'm going to copy this path, and I'm going to say that this is going to be the destination. This is where I want the backup to come. And I have the source folder. So source, I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to choose this part, and I'm going to put the source. Once this is done, it's going to tell the workflow that these two conditions are now satisfied, and you can see that the page automatically refreshed itself, and it's now on the implementation stage. So if you go back to workflow, everything is now completed, and it's now on the circuit. And you can just directly see the circuit here. You don't need to go back to the circuits page. You can directly see a preview on what execution is currently happening. So it's already running. You can see it has already, it started the process. This will take a couple of minutes to complete the execution. We'll give it a minute. And likewise, how you saw the other views, you can also see the code view and the log view straight from the workflow. You don't need to navigate back and forth here. So while we are here, while the process is still running, I'll just take you back to the application, and I'll just take you to the workflow creation for a quick minute. Perfect. So we have that's the flow, the workflow which we just saw inside the change itself. So that's what we are seeing on the screen right now. And you can see we have added one more node on the right hand side that says Zoho Circuit. Just drag and drop that in, and that will display which circuit you want to incorporate. And once you do that, you can just draw a node between, and you can choose however you want to navigate from that point. So this is still running, so we'll give it like a couple more minutes. Perfect. You can see that it's a success story, and the files have been backed up. The input and the output is displayed, and once again the duration is on the right hand side. We will quickly verify that as well. So I'll take you back. So this is the source folder. I'll take you to the destination, and perfect. We can see the backup already created. So this is how you incorporate a PowerShell script to run on your Windows servers and machines, and it can automate a lot of tasks. And see the final action. So once this PowerShell script runs and it completes the data backup, we also had one more flow where we wanted to automatically close the change and add an entry that says close completed, and also put in a note, a closure code. So I'm going to refresh the page here. So it's now completed. It's now on the end status. And if I close it, you can see that the change closed itself. So if I go into the close stage, I can see the closure code has been inputted and the description being the data, ERP data backup was successful. Likewise, you can build your own circuits to trigger automations anywhere that you want within the change workflow. You can contact your Windows machines, your Linux, your Unix machines, also your cloud platforms through webhooks and functions. And you can automate a lot of scenarios and use cases using such circuits. So with that, we are nearing to the end of today's presentation. So yeah, so if you have any questions post the session, drop an email to our support, which you'll see on the chat window, or you can also contact hello@servicedeskplus.com and a team would route it to us. So with that, we're ending today's presentation. You guys have been a wonderful audience today, and I'll see you guys in another session. Thank you so much. Have a great day.